And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson-Klutz, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to have your modules create content when they're installed? There's a module for that. It's called Default Content, and it was created in October of 2015 by prolific contributor Lee Rowlands, who goes by Laralan, though the most recent releases are by Sasha Grossenbacher, who goes by Berdir, also a maintainer of many popular Drupal modules. Now, the version available is 2.0.0 Alpha 2, which works with Drupal 9 and 10. Does have a security coverage, it's opted into security coverage, but needs a stable release before it will actually be covered by the security team. It also has test coverage and documentation, and there are 105 open issues, 29 of which are bugs against the current branch, which is pretty good considering that the module is in use by almost 20,000 sites, according to Drupal.org. Now, the module provides a way for other modules to include default content in the same way that many modules already include default configuration. The module exports content as YAML files, and your module can specify the content that should be exported by listing the UUIDs in the info.yaml file. It also provides a number of drush commands to export a single entity, to export an entity and all of its dependencies, or to bulk export all of the content referenced in a module's info.yaml file. There is also a companion project to export default content using an action within a view, which also makes me think it could probably be automated with something like ECA if you needed that. Exported content should be kept in a content directory within your module, where it will be imported during install on any site that has the default content module installed. I thought this would be a good module to cover today because Drupal core's recipe system also includes support for default content. So when you install a recipe, it will similarly import any YAML encoded content in the recipe. In fact, I used this module for the first time exporting taxonomy terms. I wanted a recipe to create as default values for a taxonomy that it creates. Since recipes will be a big part of Starshot, I expect default content to be getting a lot of use in the coming months. So let's talk about default content.
So just out of curiosity on the last point that you raised there, if you were to use a recipe, right, that then used default content, and then you were to uninstall default content, the default content, I'm assuming, stays after it's been added to the site, right? It's not like it's dependent on the module, right? Interesting. Okay. That's pretty cool.
And actually, just to clarify that on that point, John, you actually don't even need the default content module installed when you install the recipe for it to ingest that content or for it to create the content. That's actually built into the core recipe system.
So where does the core recipe default content capability stop and this module start? I don't really understand where the overlap is or why I would use a module if I can just use something in core.
So there's really two answers for that. So number one is with this module, you can have default content in your module as opposed to a recipe. And also this module can be used as a simple way to generate those YAML files from your content, as opposed to sort of, manually creating those.
So interesting.
It's like tools for extending and using what's in core.
Exactly.
That sounds great.
You mentioned that you used it to create some taxonomies, but does it, I wonder, I think the answer is no, to be clear, but I wonder if this helps with the situation that you occasionally run into when you're trying to set like defaults for taxonomy terms. Because if you kind of have to do a two-step process where you create the taxonomy on a higher environment, pull that to your local, then set the default. Otherwise, UIDs don't always line up. Does this allow you to know what the UID is for a particular taxonomy term, even if the actual TID changes or something, or do you still kind of have to do that shuffle to set defaults?
So default content, I would say, works entirely based on UUIDs. So even when you're telling telling the module in your info.yaml which content you want it to create those YAML files for. All of that is done by specifying the UUID. So I would definitely expect it to be able to have a predictable UUID for things like entity references, as long as it doesn't have to be sort of based on something that can change between environments like an NID or a TID.
Okay. That might be another really nice use case because whenever whenever you set up like a filter in views or something based on taxonomy IDs, sometime that haven't been for vocabularies that haven't been created yet, things get a little weird. And sounds like this might help with that. I'll have to test that next time I need that. Thanks, Martin. I still don't quite know how you find such on-topic modules week after week. But if folks want to suggest module of the week, what's the best way for them to do that?
We're always happy to get nominations for module of the week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social channels.